Hello, friends. Welcome to the Particularly Peculiar podcast. My name is Taylor,
And my name is Christian.
and we are your hosts.
Today we're going to be talking about strange social experiments.
And I am so psyched for this topic. I love social experiments. I obviously have learned about these a lot in my classes, but I could read about these things all day.
Right.
They're so interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard about some here and there, but never really looked too much into them until now.
Yeah,
And really pretty interesting stuff.
it is. It's so interesting. I think my favorite thing about it is they just really show you like human condition,
Right.
how humans actually think and react. And it is so incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I really think the social experiments that we have picked out today are such good examples of the human reaction, especially in the form of discipline or power, and how, as humans, we latch on to power so quickly, like most people do.
It's weird because mine is also very much
Yeah.
like power, or I guess, I don't know, power, aggression, but just very much,
Authority.
yeah,
Yeah. You really don't want to think that people would be like that,
right,
but these experiments show otherwise,
right,
I think. And how quickly it happens
yeah,
in these situations is remarkable, I think.
true.
So, the experiment that I chose to cover today is an experiment called the third wave, which took place in 1967. A California high school history teacher, his name was Ron Jones, he was teaching his class about World War II and the Nazi regime and everything happening around that era in Germany. And he was having a hard time getting his students to understand how the people of Germany accepted this movement. Not everyone, but it was, it
A
was
lot. It
a
was
big movement.
obviously, yeah.
And at the time, they were accepting of this movement.
I think that, when you look back on everything that happened with Nazis, we kind of forget that everything has to start somewhere. Like, it's not like they just came out and were like, let's start a Holocaust.
Right.
Like it wasn't like that.
No.
I mean, I don't know if it really happened very gradually, but I think especially once people get behind someone or something or an idea, they don't want to admit, oh, like maybe this isn't
Right. They
what
kind
I
of
should be or what I should be behind, or things like that.
they keep going with it
Correct.
even into the uncomfortable times.
Correct, because they think that's the right thing to do. They think, this person has our best interest in mind, and this, like, I think even modern day examples with politics is something that we see where people just kind of keep following, and they kind of blindly fall into line. And I think that's something that, looking back, we're like, how could people have accepted that and gone ahead with that? Well, it didn't just like happen like that. It wasn't just all the bad things happened at once.
Yeah, during that time it was
Right.
started small, escalated.
Sorry, go ahead.
So he was trying to figure out a way that he could explain to them how this was possible. So he decided to start this fictitious social movement about fascism and the things going on then. The motto of it was strength through discipline, strength through community, and strength through action and pride. The experiment ended up lasting a total of 5 days is all, but a lot happened within those 5 days. And while this was happening, the documentation on it in 1967 is very sparse because it wasn't meant to be this big social experiment. It was
Right. It
just
was just
a
for like a
teacher of a
high school
class.
class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were 2 stories printed in the school newspaper at the time, just brief articles about
Right.
what had happened. And then in the future, years later, a lot of the students came out and talked about what had happened. Ron Jones has ran with this, who was the teacher of this class. He has ran with this really his whole life. And through all this research, I found his website, which talks all about it, and then also his Facebook,
Oh,
his personal Facebook,
right.
and he still talks all about it. And
Wow.
he does like solo performing acts about it and stuff.
Weird.
Yeah.
What is
So
he like? One man show like
yeah,
rendition?
yeah, and he
No,
does like
really?
poetry style stuff about it.
Wow.
He is
Well,
still
so for me to think like this teacher does this experiment one off type of, oh, I'm gonna do this to teach my kids about, how is it that he's still so, to me, I feel like he is really trying to start something here or keep it going if he's still doing these things.
yes. So that is part of the controversy
Okay. Well,
of the
why don't you
experiment.
tell us a little bit about the experiment and then we can chit chat later.
On the first day of this experiment, the students came into class and Mr. Jones had written on the board, "Strength through discipline." The students were expected to sit at attention before the bell rang, and if they wanted to ask or answer any questions, they had to stand up first, and they had to do so with 3 words or less. When they were speaking, they had to start every sentence with Mr. Jones. So he really advised on the strict adherence to all of these rules. And that's just how it started out. It was just him being an authoritative figure saying, these are the things you have to do, and you have to listen to me. You must do them this way. And this was only meant to be a 1-day exercise. Seeing how well they listened to his instructions, he decided to take it into another day. So the second day, when they came in, he had added strength through community to the chalkboard. And this day, he really named the experiment because now he realized that this was going to be, he's like, well, let's just turn this into a whole experiment and see where this goes. So that was the day that he actually named it the third wave. And they created a salute which slightly resembled the Nazi salute. So this new salute was for them to identify members in and out of class because they started to recruit new people by the end of this day.
Which is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. When I was in high school, I'm just like between class, probably talking to friends, like trying to figure out a way to get out of school early,
Right.
not recruiting members for the cause, you know?
Right. And yeah, so they designed a banner. They, were recruiting people. It was turning into quite a movement.
But I guess that's probably in class. He probably made it somewhat of an assignment to go
Yeah.
out and recruit as
Yes.
many people as you could.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of it, was for them to see how this could expand.
Right.
And so then the third day, they had added strength through action to the chalkboard and also to the motto. So now the total motto was the full strength through community, strength through discipline, and action. Also on this day, they really created an initiation procedure for all new members,
Okay.
and they were following that procedure. By the end of this day, they had 200 participants
Wow.
throughout the school. And Mr. Jones had told the students that they were to report to him if people were failing to abide by the rules set forth by Mr. Jones himself. And to his surprise, there was several, I think they said 20 students had gone to him reporting this failure. So then they decided to conduct trials, figuring out whether or not these new members were loyal enough.
These kids be savage.
Yeah. And then the punishment for if they were to be found to be unloyal to the cause, they were banished to the school library.
Oh no, my worst nightmare.
That was their punishment. So really at this point, the students had taken over like a lot. And
Well, and
this
I
is
mean-
expanding very quickly. So going into the fourth day, Mr. Jones noticed how out of hand this was getting. So he had decided on the fourth day that he was going to end it. He's like, it needs to stop here. This is enough, because there were students that they had created like a bodyguard division to keep people out of the classroom, and there was reports of some physical attacks.
I was going to say there had to have been a lot of conflict between, children, essentially. Kids are impressionable, if they get something in their heads and they are going with it, they're going to go with it.
Yeah, and they were going 100%. And like I said, there was some physical attacks, and just everything was getting pretty aggressive. So the way he decided to end the movement was he told all of the members of the third wave that this experiment was a part of a new national movement, and that tomorrow at noon there was going to be a presidential candidate introducing himself into the presidential race as a member of this new movement.
Interesting.
So he had told them, there's this rally at noon, everybody show up, we'll watch it together as a watch party. So the next day, all the students showed up for the rally at 11:50, and Mr. Jones had arranged for some of his friends to impersonate news reporters, and they were going around collecting stories from the students and asking them what they thought about the movement. What they learned is that the students, they were really into it. After the 10 or so minutes of them talking with the reporters and everything, Mr. Jones leads the rally with chanting strength through discipline, strength through community, and strength through action. And there was this big chant going on, and then he turns to the TV, turns it on. Well, it's just nothing. It's just an empty, unused channel. So after a few minutes of nothing happening, he got on the mic and told everybody that it was an experiment. He had made it up, that it's not real, and then turned on a movie about the Nazi regime, and they watched it, and then it was over. And that was it.
Whoa.
So it ended rather abruptly.
I wonder about the kids, though, because if they believed so much in that, I wonder if just showing them about the Nazi regime, if then they were like, oh, like, I don't want to be like a Nazi. Or, there had to have been kids that were like, no, like, I believe this. Like, this is something that should continue.
Right. Which leads into some of the controversy that people were saying that this was all based on anti-Semitism and racism, and he was purposefully, while seemingly inadvertently,
Right.
was purposefully starting this movement.
Sure.
And then just said, oh no, just kidding.
Right.
And
Well, that's like what I was saying at the beginning. That's kind of where I was going with that. Like,
yeah, and like you were saying, the fact that he still continues to talk about this is questionable.
it'd be different if he was educating on this experiment, but like you said, it wasn't very well known like, yeah, people have talked about it since, but he's not just going out and educating about the experiment. Like, he's continuing his ideas.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure
Okay.
on what everything contains, the stuff that he does now. I
Sure.
mean, I know he does a lot of speaking and things. I'm not sure if all of his speaking is related to the fact that, see, I told you people are easily persuaded into something like this, or he's
Right.
going around talking saying, see, this works really well. We should do this.
Right.
And I'm not sure which
Sure.
way he goes with that. Now, there are a lot of other people who say that it never even happened in the first place, that it was all completely made up. And which I kind of find hard to believe because a lot of this, a lot of the things that came out in the years after were from the students themselves talking about the movement.
Right.
There's also some controversy whether or not it was 5 days or nine, which is weird. That's almost double the time. But all of the initial accounts say it was 5 days.
I would say 9 would almost seem more believable with how many people they gained.
How quickly it
Yeah, I
expanded.
mean, I can't imagine in one day recruiting 200 kids
Right.
to be in this, movement or whatever.
Yeah. So, and once again, like I said, once I really started to research this, I didn't realize, I mean, how much was really going on in it. And then getting into the side where people are saying that this never actually happened, I got really confused, and so started getting onto a lot of other websites, but there's just so much about it now, and it's funny that I had never heard about it, but there are movies, documentaries, books, TV programs. There was a documentary released in 2010 that used interviews of the original students, and this documentary was called Lesson Plan. So,
Clever. Clever name.
right. Then there was also a TV special released back in 1981 called The Wave, which I think is the most popular one about this topic. And then there's plenty more books, shows, movies, all that. So to think that it never even happened in the first place, to me, is hard to believe.
Yeah, that is hard to believe. But I will say it's kind of strange. I have never come across this experiment, like in any of our books or anything in school. I have never heard of it.
Right. So just
Yeah.
strange, but the internet, can turn up many things. Now, I used my sources mainly started with Wikipedia. It has a really good write up on it, but also Ron Jones himself. His own website is ronjoneswriter.com, and then thewavehome.com are other websites that you can learn more information about this movement if you're curious. And like I said, his Facebook is available as well.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. We might have to check that out later.
yeah, thewavehome.com linked to that website's Facebook page, but then when you go on to that Facebook page of The Wave, there's minimal interaction on there besides Ron Jones himself. He comments, on some of the things on there. And that website is really promoting all of the things he's doing. So where he will be performing next,
Sure.
where he's going to be live and everything. So really pretty interesting. And like I said, it just kind of exploded into a lot more than I thought. And that's really just a quick overview of it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think we could probably do almost one whole episode of like really a deep dive of that.
Yes. Especially all of the different takes on it,
Right.
afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I guess if we want to, I can jump into my social experiment.
Yes. What is next?
I decided to cover the the Stanford prison experiment.
Classic.
Yes, this is probably one of my favorites. It's usually very well known. It's in every psychology book you could ever imagine. So it's not very original, but it's very interesting. So
Absolutely.
that's kind of, I love it. I already knew a lot about it. That's why I decided to take it on. So if any of you have been in a psych class, you may remember this study. The purpose of the Stanford prison experiment, it was a psych or social experiment. It was conducted by Philip Zimbardo. It took place in 1973. The point of this experiment was to see whether the mistreatment of inmates in prisons or jails was due to the personality of the guards or if it was more due to the environment of the institution. So, meaning maybe the prisoners and guards have clashing personalities that cause them to have issues. Of course, when one doesn't respect law and order, and then one is arrogant or aggressive or, domineering.
Right.
So, Zimbardo figured it was probably more situational than due to personalities, and that's what he wanted to find out. So, in this study, Zimbardo converted a part of the basement in a psych building at Stanford into a prison. He then searched for volunteers within the campus. There were 75 people who applied, but they had to undergo multiple tests. They wanted to eliminate anyone with like mental illness, drug issues, etc. The reason for that is so they had the most healthy people going into this experiment. But
Okay.
what I find interesting is that usually the people that are in prison anyway are not our most mentally fit people. They have drug issues, they have criminal pasts. So it's interesting to me that you wouldn't use the same demographic.
Probably just to eliminate that as being a factor, so somebody couldn't just write it off and say, "Oh, well, it's because they're drug addicts." And,
Absolutely.
so it's to show that even considered normal, healthy people, quote unquote,
Would have this effect
yes,
on
it
them.
has the
Yes.
same.
And that is a fair argument, but I also think we would have to take into consideration that that isn't the demographic in prison. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, but I also think that that's missing a big part there.
Well, so he was trying to prove that it was environmental,
Correct.
not. So that's why, yeah, he was focusing mostly on the environment, not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Anyways, all in all, there were 24 men selected to participate, and they would be paid $15 a day, which doesn't seem like much, but that in 1973 would be the equivalent to about $110 a day today.
Sure.
So, I mean, they're making out pretty good. They're like, I just have to go, do this. I don't even know if they knew exactly what the experiment was. I don't know if they knew they were going to going to a place. Like, I don't know if that was just like, hey, we'll pay $110 a day if you want to participate, or well, $15 a day,
Right.
But they didn't know it was like a prison setting. They didn't know how they were expected to act or any of that. So it's just interesting. That was probably the way they got them to agree to do
Yeah.
it without knowing any aspects of it, I imagine.
Kind of a blind study.
Yeah, absolutely. So the men selected were randomly assigned a role. They were either assigned to be a prisoner or a guard. There was 2 who were in reserves, and then there was 1 man who decided not to go through with it at all. So all in all, there ended up being 10 prisoners and 11 guards
Okay.
in the study. They treated those who were selected as prisoners in the study like a real prisoner. And to kick off the study, they actually went to their homes and arrested them. And then they took them in for booking at an actual police station.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they really, they did it exactly how it could be done. They were then blindfolded and taken to their prison. So they didn't know where they were at because obviously it was Stanford, right? So they didn't want them to know they were on campus.
Okay.
Once they were there in their quote unquote prison, they were stripped of their clothes, totally naked. They had to be deloused just as you would in prison. And of course, they had all their personal belongings taken, including their clothes. They were given their prison uniform and the number by which they were referred to keep them anonymous. So the prisoners were only referred to by their numbers. They did not use any names. All guards wore a typical khaki uniform, and they were actually allowed to carry a billy club just in case. They were required to wear special sunglasses to make eye contact with prisoners impossible, which I find kind of weird, but whatever. Probably to make it less personal for them, considering that they're supposed to be impersonal like prisoners and guards, but that's hard for people who don't fit into that role anyway, you
Yeah.
know. The guards would take shifts. They would work 8 hours at a time with 3 in the prison at one time, and the others would be on call in case they were needed. The guards were instructed to do whatever they needed to maintain law and order, but no physical violence was allowed. Okay. Zimbardo, of course, observed, but he also decided to play the role of a prison warden, that will come about later. Kind of interesting there. Within just a few hours of the study, the guards really began playing their role. They started harassing inmates right away, and on the first night, they woke them up in the middle of the night by blowing their whistles over and over and calling out all their ID numbers. They said that they were doing this to familiarize everyone with their number and get them used to being called it off guard, things like that. But soon the prisoners would follow suit with taking on the role. They discussed issues within the prison. They snitched on each other. They would try to side with guards when things went wrong. And, of course, they tried to get on the guards' good side. There was physical punishment. They did favor push-ups for punishment, but the guards would actually step on the backs of the inmates doing the push-ups. And they even instructed other prisoners to sit on the inmates while doing them. Not only that, but the prisoners were just generally taunted, dehumanized. They were given very little to do, and most tasks for them to accomplish were meaningless and boring. So you can imagine with being bored, being, stuck in a cell, like, it's going to cause some issues, right?
Yes.
I mean, just like in real prison, obviously. There wasn't much of an issue the first day, so the next morning the guards were taken by surprise when a riot somewhat broke out. The prisoners ripped off their number badges. They barricaded themselves in their cells with their mattresses, and the guards had to call in the other guards who were on call. The guards eventually decided they had to use the power they were given as guards. They broke into the cells, they stripped the prisoners naked, they removed everything from their cells. The ringleaders of the rebellion were sent to solitary. The guards really decided to step it up with torment with the offending prisoners, but they gave the special privilege to those who were least involved. The people who were least involved with that riot were able to dress. They got any personal items that were in their cells back. They were able to brush their teeth, keep up with their hygiene, and they were actually given special food to eat in front of the prisoners who had all of their rights taken away, including the right to eat.
Rude.
Yes. Of course, what they were doing is trying to create a separation within the prisoners so there was no banding together if a riot occurred again.
Right.
The prisoners, of course, were totally dependent on the guards, so the prisoners became more and more dependent while the guards became more and more withholding. As the prisoners were being broken down, it was like the guards were essentially being built up by that. One would become more subservient while the other became more domineering. So, the one prisoner that we hear a lot about when we discuss this case is prisoner number 8612. And I'm going to quote directly from simplypsychology.com here. That's where I got a lot of this information. But they said, less than 36 hours into the experiment, prisoner number 8612 began suffering from acute emotional disturbance, disorganized thinking, uncontrollable crying, and rage. After a meeting with the guards, where they told him he was weak, but offered him informant status, number 8612 returned to the other prisoners and said, "You can't leave, you can't quit." Soon 8612 began to act crazy, scream, curse, go into a rage, and was just out of control. It wasn't until this point that the psychologist realized they had to let him out. So this guy was like totally breaking down. He was losing his mind. And this was just less than 36 hours in.
Right.
So that's one already just wild. While they were in there, they did hold a parents' day. And that day they were treated well. They were bathed. They were able to eat. They were able to listen to music while they cleaned up their cells and all that good stuff. It was all good, but then a rumor spread of many of the inmates trying to plan an escape during the family visit. So after all the parents left, they gave them punishments. They were even doing work like scrubbing toilets with their bare hands.
Gross.
Yeah, obviously, if they had anything like a prison situation, like the prison toilets, do they flush? Is it like a vacuum thing? I don't even know. Like, gross. I don't want my hands where a million other people have peed, especially if I'm not wearing gloves.
Right.
So, and they're probably using pretty heavy cleaning chemicals too, I imagine,
Probably,
the
yeah.
70s, right? Everyone was just like throwing bleach everywhere.
It was bleach and cocaine.
Bleach, cocaine, lava lamps. It was crazy. Okay, so anyway, eventually another prisoner broke down. This was prisoner number 819. A priest was there for a visit when this prisoner broke down and began to cry hysterically. So since prisoner 8612 had kind of had a nervous breakdown of sorts, when this guy started crying like he did and was pretty hysterical, the psychologists that were in there removed any chains from him. They took the little hat off his head that they had to wear. They had him go and rest. They told him that they would go get him some food and take him to see a doctor because they wanted to, keep it kind of not as bad as 8612 had been. But while that was going on, the guards lined up the other prisoners and had them chant out, "Prisoner number 819 is a bad prisoner. Because of what prisoner number 819 did, my cell is a mess, Mr. Correctional Officer." I don't know what he did. I'm not sure what happened, but they were just there to chant and say, "He's a bad prisoner, he's a bad prisoner, he's a bad prisoner," while he's breaking down and crying. Like,
Okay.
terrible.
Yes.
So the psychologist who was letting this fellow go and get something to eat, take a little rest, kind of take a break from the experiment, because remember, this is all still an experiment, went to find him and he was just sobbing uncontrollably and he was just like inconsolable. So they decided he also had to leave the experiment. But when he was told he could leave and probably should leave, he was told, or he said he could not leave because then the other prisoners would label him as a bad prisoner. So this is already like almost brainwashing him,
Right.
which is just wild that it's not even that long at this point,
Yeah.
It's just like crazy. Finally, Zimbardo, who was playing the prison warden but was like the overseeing of the experiment, came to him and said, "Listen, you're not number 819. You are who you are," said his name. "And my name is Dr. Zimbardo. I am a psychologist. I'm not a prison superintendent. This is not real. This is just an experiment. These are students, not prisoners, just like you." Like, and had to basically talk him through it and be like, "Remember, this isn't real. This isn't happening."
It's so hard to believe that that would happen.
Isn't it crazy? It
You'd
is.
think you would keep that in the back of your mind the whole time, but I mean, I guess the human mind is a pretty crazy place.
Well, and you can convince yourself of almost anything. So I think if you're in that place with people acting the part and it's consistent and that's all that there is, there's nothing else. There's no activities. They don't have anything to do. They don't have anything to look forward to. It's literally just that. So I think it was very easy for them to get wrapped up in the fact that this was, it was very easy for them to get stuck with the thought that that was real and it was really happening to them.
Right.
I mean, because it was really happening to them. I think they just forgot that they could say, "Hey, I don't have to have this happening to me. Like, I can leave,"
Right.
Originally, they wanted the experiment to run for 2 weeks, but it had to be terminated after only 6 days.
Right, because it was getting so bad.
It was getting so bad. So there was just so much excessive aggression of the guards, and the prisoners were becoming emotionally unable to handle the situation. So it is crazy that they chose some of the most mentally healthy men and whatever with the great backgrounds and no drug issues and da da da, and they were breaking down the way that they were.
Right.
You
I wonder what the correlation is to that, saying that these seemingly normal people with no issues and whatever this happens to is that because it's such a stark difference,
Right.
such a
That's
drastic difference to their regular everyday lives. And then you go to people that are used to being on the wrong side of the law, you could say, and they're used to having issues with authority figures already.
correct.
You know,
And that's kind of what I was saying earlier with like, it is strange to me that they aren't going with this similar demographic
yeah,
because it is a big difference. It's a very stark difference.
right.
So, yeah, it is very strange. So, Christina, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this last name correctly, but Christina Maslock was a Stanford PhD. She was brought in to do interviews for the study, but she actually declined and told Zimbardo that she was not going to participate because of the terrible conditions these prisoners were under
Right.
and how they were being treated. Apparently, there were over 50 other people who had seen the prison, and this doctor was the only person to call out Zimbardo for the maltreatment
Really.
of these boys. Yes. So, anyway, Zimbardo actually stated in 2008 that he did not realize how far he had gotten into his own role as prison warden.
Yeah, he was also buying in.
But he was the person who put this together. He is a psychologist. He should have been very aware, of the, I don't know, repercussions of doing that. I
Right.
mean, I feel like you wouldn't want to insert yourself into that. Basically, it was realized how people will conform to social roles, especially if their roles are already very stereotyped. So, this also shows that environment or the situation that people are in plays a big role in how people will act. So, Zimbardo actually explained this in two ways. He explained de-individuation, which may explain the behavior, especially of the guards. This is a state when you become so immersed in the norms of the group that you kind of lose your sense of self and your identity and any personal responsibility you have as a person. So it says here that, and I'm quoting from the Simply Psychology here, the guards may have been so sadistic because they did not feel what happened was down to them personally. It was a group norm. So that's a possibility. It says also that they may have lost some sense of their actual personal identity because they were wearing a uniform,
Right.
which I guess I find it hard to believe that putting on an outfit of clothing is going to change your personality so dramatically, so drastically.
I could see where it could really. I mean, especially like you were saying, where their position is already stereotyped. So these people that were putting on the guard uniforms probably already had a mental picture of how a guard acts. So
Absolutely.
then when they're dressing the part and playing the part, they probably can buy in a lot better.
Right. And that's the thing is like they knew they had to play a role. So I think they know that playing a role as a prison guard means being violent and being aggressive, which is unfortunate, but at the time it was very common.
Well, and I think they didn't really realize that until the morning of the second day. It says that the first day was pretty good.
Yeah, it
It
was
went
fairly
pretty.
uneventful. Like it wasn't a great day in prison, but it was an uneventful day. There wasn't any like outbursts or, you know.
Yeah. So the first day went pretty well. And then the morning of the second day, when that kind of riot,
A mini riot.
when the mini riot happened, the guards realized they're really going to have to step it up. Otherwise they will lose control. And their whole purpose of being a guard is guarding the control, of the facility.
Right. So another thing that Zimbardo had explained was learned helplessness, which this could explain some of the submission of prisoners. The prisoners learned that whatever they did had little effect on what happened to them. So in this mock prison environment, this fake prison, the unpredictable decisions of the guards led the prisoners to just give up. So they learned helplessness. They were
Right.
like, well, nothing I am going to do is going to matter.
Yeah.
So that was just, yeah. Many of the students who played guards were appalled with themselves and how they acted. They did not realize that they had that like evil, aggressive, mean streak inside of them.
Hmm.
And the prisoners felt the same way, that they didn't realize they would be essentially cowardice in a situation like that, you know? I would say that this came back to some positive and negative reinforcement for both the guards and the prisoners. So the guards were almost receiving a positive reinforcement from the other guards, you know, treating prisoners a certain way. They would be praised, of course. And the prisoners knew they had to act submissive, like I said, with learned helplessness, kind of. They had to keep their heads down and be quiet, otherwise, they knew they would be punished. So that's that negative reinforcement there.
Right.
There is a lot more detail I could go into with guard behavior. There was prisoners who were not treated well at all. There was a lot more violence than what we talked about in the episode today. I don't know, maybe if you guys are interested, we could go a little more in detail with like actual info from students who were interviewed and stuff like that. There's a lot of good information. I actually watched a couple videos in my one of my psych classes with a couple of the guards. And some of them you are like, dude, that's very problematic that you think that you could just do this to somebody. Like,
Right.
even though you're in a certain situation, like it's still not real and you know that.
Well, and I'm sure that some of the things that happened were influenced by the fact that they knew that this was just an experiment. I mean,
Yes.
so they would think, well, it's not actually real, so I'm just going to like play it hard, and then this is all going to be over with anyway. And then as they do more, they realize maybe it's fun,
Yeah, I
and
think a
then,
lot of them found it fun to be able to be in a dominant role and
yeah.
be kind of like the boss and be the person in charge.
Yeah, so it,
I mean, who wouldn't, like you said in yours? Like, so many people just want that power, you know? It's so easy to get people behind, I think, to fall in line when there is power to gain.
yeah, and even in my experiment example, it all starts small, like we had said, because if you think about the fundamental aspect of it, I mean, as far as mine goes, the community, discipline, and action or whatever, at its base is, I mean, good. You want to
Yeah,
have a good community.
right.
You want people to do the things that they should do, and
Like,
you
yeah, it
you
all
want people
sounds
to
good
act
having
right. Yeah.
discipline and, yeah, it all
Yeah.
sounds good.
It all sounds good, and then you throw humans into it, and then it's not so good.
Well, and humans are not perfect. And I think that's why it's so hard with some of these, because it's like there are so many factors that come into a social experiment. Like, you can control it so much, but really humans are humans. So I feel like that has to make it so hard to actually come to a definitive, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Conclusion.
yeah, conclusion about a study. But there are plenty of clips on YouTube about the Stanford prison experiment. There's so much information on it. It is very well known. If you want to dive in, there's so much out there to find. There is a documentary I found that's called Quiet Rage. Let's see here. And yeah, like I said, YouTube is a great resource. Just Google that crap. It's everywhere. The biggest thing that came out of this study, though, maybe it was not even the findings from the study. The biggest thing that came out of it was the red flag for ethical issues, especially in these types of experiments that were going on.
Which there were lots of crazy experiments conducted in the early days.
Yes, I think like probably from the 30s, 40s, and, there were probably a lot of questionable experiments or whatever going on because truthfully, there wasn't I mean, tons of really good, like solid psych research until very recently. And even still, it is.
While the ethics and everything is very questionable in a lot of these experiments, because of a lot of these experiments happening, we've gained a lot of information,
We learned so much from these experiments. Like,
Yes.
that's the thing I have said probably in my classes before is that although that some of these are terrible and you look at them and you see how people were treated, or probably a lot of people have lasting trauma from a lot of these social experiments, which we should never. I mean, I can't think I would ever want to put someone through a trauma just to find answers for something, but we learned so much about humans, how humans function, how the brain works, how society works, how, I mean, just personalities, social environments, everything.
Yeah.
We learned so much.
We did learn a lot from these experiments, and I'm glad that we were able to discuss them.
Yeah, we learned a lot from each other today, I think.
I think so too.
So today was kind of different because usually we're talking and laughing and joking. So this was kind of a little deep and kind of a little sad. But I think, yeah, we learned a lot in this episode from talking to each other. And I thought it was a great episode. I think we really came in with the heavy hitters and did our research. We knocked it out of the park.
Yes, I think that the two experiments we chose out of a plethora of experiments that were crazy,
Yeah, that were all very questionable.
we picked a couple good ones, and I think in the future we should do another episode on a couple more, because these social experiments, like we said, you can learn a lot from them. While some of them are seemingly terrible, at the same time they are successful in, developing conclusions and
Yeah, absolutely.
really progressing.
Confirming hypotheses, confirming theories. I don't know.
Right.
Something like that. Sounds smart. So thank you guys for listening today. We would love to have some feedback. What do you guys think of these studies? Are they good? Were they helpful? Were they just a bad idea and a terrible thing to put these people through? Or what do you think?
Yes, please send us an email at Taylor, Taylor, at particularlypeculiar.com, or follow us on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook at Particularly Peculiar Pod. As always, make sure to rate, follow, subscribe, comment, like, all the things. You know what to do. So, until next time,
We will see you again,
our
our
peculiar
peculiar
people.
people.